now what I spend the rest of this chapter doing is drawing maps of blood vessels that you need to know. And the ones you need to know are actually listed in lab activity 10 that I edited. I took some vessels out that we're not going to do. Superior branches off the aorta. Actually, what I usually do first is draw a very sophisticated heart. There's my anatomical heart. Okay, so we need to start at the heart. And I'll keep doing this in red. So hopefully you remember the aorta is this big blood vessel that comes out of the left ventricle and it's going to head to the entire body. Wow, my pen is really behind me in the drawings, so I'm not going to go too fast. Ah, that's too long. Sorry. Okay, be short because it immediately branches like this. And then so I usually have students draw this while they're watching me do it. So you don't have to draw it right now if you don't have a piece of paper and pen in front of you. If you're watching a video, though, you could pause. Because it is really helpful, I think, to draw these so that you get a sense of where to put each branch. Usually we call this part the ascending aorta, this part the aortic arch, and then this part the descending, we would say thoracic in this area. And then when you cross diaphragm, actually the aorta wouldn't thin out, but when it goes through the diaphragm, then we call this the abdominal aorta. Okay, so there's three major branches off of the aorta. Actually, there's two that come off before these three major branches. They come off right about there. These are the ones that go to the heart muscle tissue. And if they get clogged, which can happen, blockage, really bad, have a heart attack, coronary arteries. Those are the first two vessels to come off the aorta, are the right and left coronary arteries, and they go to the heart muscle. And then one of the branches of the left is that sometimes called anterior interventricular. That's what anatomists call it. Apparently, in clinical settings, they usually call it the LAD, left anterior descending. That's the most commonly clogged coronary artery. It causes death sometimes, and you'll need maybe a bypass for it. But those are the first two branches, are actually the coronaries. These three major branches are the ones we're really focusing on right now. This one here, it's really short. It like starts here, ends there, and then immediately branches into these two. It's called the brachiocephalic. So I mentioned this when I was doing the heart, this word trunk. That word trunk just means a vessel that branches really soon. So it's a really short vessel. It can be wide. This one's wide, but it's really short and immediately branches into two other things. However, I would also take brachiocephalic artery. We'll take either one, brachiocephalic A or brachiocephalic trunk for that little section. And the two branches, oh, by the way, brachio means upper limb, cephalic means head. So this vessel is going to bring blood to both the upper limb and to your head. This branch here is the one that goes to your upper limb. This is specifically the right subclavian because it goes underneath the clavicle and then it heads to your upper limb. That A has a tail there that it shouldn't. It should be A, V, I, A, and A for artery. So notice the right. Make sure you put your rights and lefts on vessels, unless I tell you otherwise, because it does become important. So make sure you put your R's and your L's, because you'll discover this is asymmetrical. You need to know whether you're on the right or the left side. And then this guy right here goes to the head. This is the right artery. That is the full name. Yes, it's long. This word common, we'll see that on a few blood vessels. We actually saw it on one of the nerves too. Common means it will eventually split into two things. It's not as short as a trunk, and it's going to come split into things that have this word in it, whatever that word is. Like we had the common fibular nerve that split into superficial and deep. The carotids happen to split into external and internal. So it's going to be, excuse me, some pair of vessels that it's going to split into when you have the word common. there's going to be some sort of split. This vessel right here, the next one off the aorta after the brachiocephalic trunk, the next one off is the left common carotid. And that's going to the left side of the head. So you'll see there's an asymmetry. The right and the left sides are not the same in their branching pattern. The right side has this extra brachiocephalic trunk that the left side does not. And actually, that is the left subclavian going to the left upper limb. So on the right side, the subclavian and the carotid come off of this shared branch, the brachiocephalic trunk, whereas on the left side, they both come directly off the aorta. So to give you an idea of blood flow, just to do that. There we go. I'm going to make the blood red. So the blood would be pumped out of the left ventricle. And it would go this way. And some of it up here. And some more of it would keep going down into your abdomen. And I didn't make these two branches. So difference between the right and the left side. The reason for that is because we're coming out of the left ventricle here, and the aorta arches around to the left side of your thorax and your abdomen. It's not going right down the center of your body. So you need this extra trunk to get to the right side, whereas the left side, because you're arching around to the left, it's easy for the branches to come off directly off the aorta. Blood supply to the head and the brain. So what we're going to do, I do for the rest of this chapter, is, okay, we've gotten out of the heart. Now we're going to go to various places in the body, and we'll start with the head. We're going to go to the head and then back to the heart, and then we'll go to somewhere else. In a later video, I'll do that and go through each of these. And then on each of these diagrams in your book, these are the ones that you would have to visually identify. Like if I pointed to, okay, I went right past it. I pointed to the, oop, get this to, oh, there it goes. If I pointed to this and asked you its name, you would have to identify what this blood vessel is. There is a bunch of extra stuff here that you don't need to know, and you don't need to know all these branches. I'll label the ones you do need to know on each diagram. I recommend to students is, you go through your textbook and all of these are going to be labeled. Like this is the thyrocervical trunk and you don't need to know it. I usually tell people to maybe highlight or circle the words you actually need to know on each diagram, so you'll ignore the other ones when you're studying. This is the right side of the body. So this, it's rather longish. It's not usually this long, so this is not quite anatomically correct. It should have branched earlier. But nonetheless, this is the brachiocephalic artery that we saw was the first big branch coming off the aorta. And notice I don't put the word right in front of it, even though it's on the right side, because there's only one. There isn't a right and left. Oh, and I usually call it trunk. I think your book does, but artery is also fine. You called it that on an exam. It's totally fine. And that brachiocephalic trunk divides into, this is the right common carotid. Oh, always put an A or a V. Then this here is the right subclavian. It's going to the upper limb. So we're not going to do anything else with it at this time. We're not going to keep following it. We'll wait till we get to the other upper limb. Oops, that is completely misspelled. Sorry, clavian artery. That is going to the upper limb. We can ignore it now. There's one other vessel. This is the right vertebral artery. And it's called vertebral artery because it goes, oh, that should be an R. It goes through your vertebrae. You can see it there. Okay. What kind of vertebrae are those? Shader, do you remember?
Isn't that the cervical?
Yeah, those are the cervical vertebrae in your neck. And you remember they had 3 holes? That's what made them unique. One of the things. It had a big hole in the center for the spinal cord. Do you remember the holes on the side?
Is it the transverse foramen?
Yes. The vertebral arteries go through those transverse foramen. You can see it there. It's bizarre, really. And the rest of the vertebrae do not have blood vessels running through them like that. But that's where the vertebral arteries are, going through those transverse foramina. Okay, so I labeled the common carotid before. Now I'm going to label these two. This right here is the right, the word right, external carotid artery. So the common carotid splits into the external and the internal. How do I know it's external? If I trace it up, you can see it branching off and going to your scalp and to your face. So that's what the external carotid does. This one, draw an arrow over there, is the internal. Oops, I went kind of past it. There it is. So this part right here is the right internal. If I move faster, my pen actually keeps up. Well, not quite. Okay, the right internal carotid artery. And that is going to the brain. So actually both of these, the vertebral and the internal carotid, are going to the brain.